I think some of the most exciting football in the UEFA competitions last week was in the Europa League. What's up? My name is Adrian, this is Rabona TV, and whether you're new to the competition or you're just looking for a quick update on all the goings on, then I've got you in this match guide. And I'll throw in a few predictions as well, just for fun. And hey, you should do the same in the comments section. And if you're finding us for the first time, then consider helping us out by hitting that subscribe button. And don't forget to join the discussion in the comments. All right. Sorry for clapping in the mic. The first on the list, and arguably the biggest clash of the round of 16, AC Milan versus Arsenal. Let's start with Arsenal. Things aren't looking too great in North London, and as per the custom of this time of the year, the Wenger out brigade is growing louder and louder, but it seems a little bit different than years past. For the average Arsenal fan, it seems less like a furious call for revolution, and more just dissolution. Instead of angry fans now, Arsenal fans seem numb and resigned to their fate, forced to watch subpar football and put up with a deluded, likely senile, 68-year-old manager who has basically turned into a meme. I mean, admittedly, I had to look up his age. I didn't know off the top of my head he was 68, and look at the first picture that comes up of the guy. It's embarrassing. But that aside, let's look at their performance in the Europa League. They easily topped their group, consisting of themselves, obviously, Red Star Belgrade, FC Köln, and Bate Borisov. Their sole loss was against bottom of the table Bundesliga side, Köln. They made relatively easy work of their round of 32 opponents, Östersund, winning 3-0 away to all but seal up the tie. However, in the return fixture at the Emirates, Östersund went 2-0 up after 23 minutes, showing that Arsenal's defensive frailties are very real, something that was reinforced even more the following weekend against City in the Carabao Cup final. Yesterday, City were just too good. Arsenal weren't particularly bad, in my opinion at least, although they didn't look good either. But anyway, Arsenal took the tie 4-2 against Östersund. Where Arsenal have just 4 wins and 6 losses in their last 13 matches, Gattuso's AC Milan is undefeated in 13 matches, 10 of which have been victories, and they haven't conceded a goal in their last 6 matches across all competitions. They do play Inter this weekend, however, which is another story entirely, and I can't comment on that because I can't read the future, unfortunately. I mean, if I could, then you wouldn't even have to watch these matches, am I right? We'd all be rolling in it. Anyway, Arsenal's record against Italian opposition is 15 wins in 31 matches, and if we're talking about these two head-to-head, it's a perfect split. 2 wins each and 2 draws. At the moment, Milan players will run through a flaming brick wall for Gattuso. They respect him, and he has their trust. Now, can you really say the same for the Arsenal players and Arsene Wenger? Yes, they have some respect for his legacy, but in this moment, do you think they really respect his decision-making? Do you think there's confidence in the team right now and in his team selection and tactics? I kind of doubt it. And that's why I think Milan will take this one 4-2. Next, we have Borussia Dortmund and FC Salzburg. That's right, FC Salzburg, not Red Bull Salzburg, because, and here's a fun fact for you, the Austrian Bundesliga doesn't have any regulations regarding sponsor names within a club name. However, UEFA obviously does. So, when Red Bull Salzburg plays in UEFA competitions, they go by FC Salzburg and play with a changed club crest. See? Hey, the more you know. Anyway, let's get to the nitty-gritty. That's a weird saying. Dortmund entered this competition having had a pretty shocking campaign in the Champions League, finishing in 3rd thanks only to a superior goal difference to bottom of the group Cypriot side, Apoel. So, in the round of 32, they faced Atalanta, in which they probably scared their fans with a 3-2 home win. Those 2 away goals could have been lethal if Atalanta was able to score twice in their home leg, but alas, Dortmund held on for a 1-1 draw and went through 4-3 on aggregate. By no means convincing, but Atalanta isn't exactly a pushover side, at least by Europa League standards. They are pretty strong. FC Salzburg went undefeated in their Europa League group with 3 wins and 3 draws, conceding only once in that space of time. In fact, after their 1-1 draw with Viktoria Guimarães on the first match day, they didn't concede once after that. They actually had the same aggregate score as Dortmund, as they defeated Real Sociedad 2-1 at home in the second leg to go through 4-3. I think that there's a lot of potential for an upset in this one. Why? Well, Salzburg has an extremely solid squad defensively. These guys haven't lost a match since August 27th, 2017. That's insane. They're undefeated in 29 matches across all competitions, having won 19 and drawn 10 along the way, and only conceding 18 goals across those 29 matches. Plus, their 25-year-old Israeli striker Munas Dabur is starting to catch fire, having scored 4 in his last 3 matches, with 20 goals in total this season. So, predictions then, guys? I think I'm going to say Salzburg goes through on away goals, 4-4. Sorry, Dortmund fans, that's my controversial, have some fun with it pick of these predictions. I like to throw one of those in there. And quite frankly, Dortmund isn't that European power they used to be. All right, up next, Lyon versus Cska Moscow. Cska is another team that was transplanted into the Europa League after finishing in 3rd place in their Champions League group behind FC Basel and Manchester United. They didn't have the worst Champions League showing, as they actually won thrice, but down to the Europa they went as they came up against Red Star Belgrade. After going away to Belgrade in the first match and leaving with a 0-0 draw, they came home and won 1-0 to progress. They almost didn't make it though, as Red Star's Cameroonian striker Ben Noabuhain missed a golden chance in the final few minutes. Lyon, on the other hand, finished 2nd in Group B behind Atalanta, losing only once along the way. They made easy work of Villarreal, winning 3-1 at home, then beating them 1-0 away to take the tie 4-1 on aggregate. Comfy, cozy. Lyon is doing fairly well in the Liga. Well, I mean, nobody is even close to PSG, so it sounds strange to say that they're doing well, but in the race for 2nd place, hey, not so bad. Mind you, they are winless in their last 5 matches in Liga. Not great. However, they performed pretty well in the Europa League last season, losing in the semifinals to Ajax 5-4 on aggregate, and I think that with the attacking firepower they boast, they'll be too much for Cska. There's still a question mark over Fekir and whether he'll be able to play in the first leg. Had to flex my weakened French muscles to get info on his injury, but as of now, it's looking like he'll be out 7 to 10 days, so nothing too bad. And by French muscles, I mean brain muscles. Yeah. So, my prediction for this one will be Lyon to take it 3-1 on aggregate. Maybe a 1-1 and a 2-0. Something like that. Now we have Atletico Madrid against Lokomotiv Moskva, the other Moscow team still in the competition. And regarding Atletico and their small squad of only 19 players, they're having a pretty decent season considering they can't stop getting rid of players. Recently they have offloaded Miguel Angel Moya, leaving them with just Oblak and Axel Werner left as goalkeepers. Axel Werner has never started a senior match in Europe, by the way. Plus, they have said goodbye to Augusto Fernandez, Luciano Vietto has gone on loan, Carrasco and Gaetan went off to China, etc, etc, leaving them with just 17 outfield players and 2 goalkeepers in their senior squad. Lokomotiv, on the other hand, topped their Europa League group, finishing ahead of the aforementioned FC Copenhagen with 3 wins, 2 draws, and a loss. That was an extremely tight group, by the way, as Lokomotiv had 11 points and both FC Copenhagen and FC Sheriff were on 9 points each. Lokomotiv impressed in the round of 32, however, as they topped Nice 4-2 on aggregate. Now, say what you will about Nice and the rough season they're having after their really impressive climb towards the upper echelons of Ligue 1 last season, but this is still a decent feat for Lokomotiv. However, it's not impressive enough for them to top Atletico, in my opinion. As I said before, they're having a pretty solid season. Yes, they were knocked out of the Copa del Rey by Sevilla, and they finished 3rd in what was a tough Champions League group alongside the likes of Chelsea and Roma and Karabag. But they're only 5 points behind Barcelona, and their attack is firing on all cylinders right now, especially when talking about Antoine Griezmann. He scored 7 goals in his last 2 matches alone. Plus, they have one of the best, if not the best, defense in the top 5 leagues right now, at least stats-wise. So, I think that will be enough for Atletico to take it relatively comfortably with an aggregate score of 5-3. Hey! We're halfway done, as we now go check out Sporting Clube de Portugal versus Viktoria Plzen. This is another one that could be a bit tricky for Sporting, who I'm sure most, myself included, peg as the favorites for this tie, but we would all be a little bit ignorant if we wrote off Viktoria completely. Why? Well, in their Europa group, they finished first with 12 points. Granted, this wasn't the most star-studded group, alongside FC Sion, Lugano, and Hapoel Beersheva. In the round of 32, they took on Partizan Belgrade, and after tying 1-1 away, they beat Partizan 2-0 at home to take it 3-1 on aggregate. Domestically, they're running away with things as they have a 12-point lead over Slavia Prague, and they lost their first match of the season on Monday after resting a few players. Sporting, on the other hand, are in the running for their first Portuguese title since the 2001-2002 season, and they could close the gap between them and FC Porto to just 2 points if they win today. That's definitely a match that I'm personally going to be watching. In Europe, however, they dropped into the Europa League after finishing third in their group, in which they admirably challenged Juventus for second behind FC Barcelona. All of their matches were close though, they were never blown out in the group stage. Their heaviest defeat was on the final match day against Barcelona, in which they lost 2-0 thanks to a goal from Paco Alcacer and an own goal from Jeremy Mathieu. Against his old team. In the round of 32, Sporting made relatively easy work of Astana, as they won the first leg away 3-1, and then in the second leg showed that they do have some defensive frailties at times, as they only managed to draw at home 3-3 against the Kazakhstan Superliga champions. This one could be a little more challenging than we think, but I do believe that Sporting will ultimately go through. Sporting will have a relatively comfortable win at home and then manage a draw away or something like that, taking them through 4-3 on aggregate. Sure, let's go with that. Marseille and Athletic Bilbao, and these two teams actually met in the round of 32 in 2016, with Athletic coming out on top. This is Marseille's first time making it to the round of 16 in Europe since 2012, and there's a bit of a question mark over them at the moment. After looking so strong in France and going on a 12-match unbeaten run across all competitions in which they won 9 of those 12 matches, Marseille have lost their last 3 matches in a row, including 2 3-0 losses to PSG, but I mean, I guess we can't really fault them for that. They do still have one of the hottest talents in France right now in Florian Thauvin, who has 16 goals and 10 assists across all competitions. He hasn't really found his stride in the Europa League yet, however, with just 1 goal and no assists from 6 appearances. Marseille finished second in the Europa League group behind the aforementioned FC Salzburg, just 2 points ahead of Konyaspor. They won 3-0 at home to SC Braga, then lost 1-0 away in the round of 32. In fact, they haven't won a single match away in the Europa League this season, and you gotta wonder if that will be a problem. But they can take solace in the fact that Athletic haven't exactly made the San Mamés Stadium a fortress, as they have lost there on 2 occasions, once during the group stage against Zoria. They still finished first on goal difference in the group stage, by the way, and then in the round of 32 against Spartak. They still went through 4-3 on aggregate though, obviously, having gone away to Spartak and won 3-1. Domestically, Athletic is struggling a bit with their form, which seems to go up and down with the changing of the tides. They sit in 12th at the moment, but in regards to their matches against Marseille, they can take some confidence in the fact that their squad boasts the Europa League's top scorer in Aritz Aduriz. Man, that guy is still killing it at 37 years old. 37 and 7 goals in 8 appearances in this competition. Not bad. This is another matchup that's super hard to call, for me at least. You can see big flaws and even bigger strengths in each team, and considering each team is by no means winning the league and are both out of their domestic cup competitions, it makes it even harder to call, as this is the only trophy they could still win this season. I like what Marseille has going on, and Thauvin is a game changer, but he's been relatively invisible in Europe, and Aduriz has been one of the best in the competition, and will just save Athletic from this tie. I'm saying 3-2 Bilbao, but that's a tough one, man. Damn. The second last tie of the round of 16 is a big one. RB Leipzig versus Zenit. Zenit were of course the top scoring side in the group stage of the Europa League, as they easily topped their group with 5 wins and 1 draw, scoring 17 and conceding only 5 along the way. Then, in the round of 32, they were handed the challenge of taking on Celtic, who had dropped down from the Champions League. After losing 1-0 away, they dispatched of Celtic with an easy 3-0 win at home. Alexander Kokorin has been killing it for them domestically with 10 goals, just as he's second in Europa League scoring with 6 goals alongside his teammate Emiliano Rigoni. They both are on 6. Leipzig, on the other hand, they're having a weird season. After struggling in the Champions League group stage and finishing 3rd behind FC Porto and Besiktas, they dropped into the Europa League round of 32 against fellow Champions League transplants Napoli in what was one of the more high-profile matchups of the round of 32. And Leipzig started out great, going away to Napoli and earning themselves a 3-1 win thanks to a second-half blitz, in which they scored all 3 away goals. Taking it back home, they didn't show up at all, and Napoli leveled the tie on aggregate, but was lacking one goal to go through, so Leipzig took it on away goals. However, besides the second half in Napoli, that's 3 halves of football that Leipzig didn't really threaten at all. Granted, Napoli are currently the best team in Italy, but you couple that with the fact that Leipzig is faltering in Germany at the moment as they sit in 6th place, and it makes this one extremely tough to call. On paper, it looks as though Leipzig may have the stronger side, but both teams have taken a few L's lately domestically. That being said, I'm going to go with Zenit to take this one 4-2, simply down to more experience in their ranks with the likes of Branislav Ivanovic, Domenico Crescito, Noboa, etc. Leipzig still have a relatively young squad with not a whole lot of experience in these situations, and that could be their downfall ultimately, if the going gets tough for them. And finally, we have SS Lazio versus Dynamo Kiev. Kiev, by the way, was the second highest scoring team in the group stage of this competition, behind only the aforementioned Zenit. I didn't need to remind you who the top scorers were. You guys are paying attention, you're smart people, you remembered. They easily topped their group with just 1 loss along the way, but they didn't have the surest defense out there either, with them conceding 9 times in 6 matches. In the round of 32, they were handed the task of breaking down the ultra-defensive AEK Athens, a team that made it out of the group stage with 1 win and 5 draws. Yikes. And AEK continued to be ultra-defensive in the round of 32, as Dynamo went to their yard and earned a 1-1 draw. And in the return leg, tied 0-0 to go through on away goals. Ugh. But I don't blame Dynamo for that boring tie. Lazio, on the other hand, cruised through their group stage as the winners, then took on FC Sion from Romania in the round of 32. After losing the first match away, Lazio slammed them 5-1 at home to go through 5-2 on aggregate. Just as they are performing extremely well domestically, both Ciro Immobile and Felipe Anderson have been dominant for Lazio in the Europa League. And after going 5 matches without a win, Lazio have begun to get things back on track, besides, of course, the shootout loss to red-hot AC Milan this week in the Coppa Italia. Defending isn't exactly Lazio's forte, which bodes well for a team such as Dynamo, whose scoring came so easily to during the group stage. However, Lazio is a bit of a forget defending and just score more than the other team kind of squad, which, when you're playing a 2-legged affair and have a guy like Ciro Immobile in your team that is running away with the Serie A scoring title and has 32 goals and 8 assists to his name this season already, that bodes fine. I think this one is going to be the most entertaining tie of the round of 16, and Lazio will take it 5-4. And there we have it, 8 matchups, 16 teams, and a lot of football to take in next week. If you haven't watched any Europa League yet, then I encourage you to do so, as last week, that's where all the excitement was in the UEFA competitions, like I said earlier in the video. I hope you enjoyed this video, I hope it was helpful, and consider subscribing if it was. My name is Adrian, thanks so much for watching. Make sure you leave your predictions in the comments section, and enjoy the matches.